Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling something huge.
Quite literally.
Literally. We are doing a deep dive into Australia's largest and I think most misunderstood desert, the Great Victoria Desert. We're not just looking at it as a patch of hot sand. This is a landscape of, extreme heat, very rare rain, and a really surprising hidden ecosystem.
And a very complex human history on top of all that.
Absolutely.
That's right. The Great Victoria Desert, or the GVD as you'll hear it called, it's one of those places that's so isolated people tend to just, gloss over it.
Right.
But it's officially classed as an ecoregion, and this is important, an interim Australian bioregion.
What does that actually mean in simple terms?
It means it's recognized on a national level for its unique biodiversity, its geology. It's a distinct place spanning huge parts of Western Australia and South Australia.
And the sources we've got today are just fantastic. They give us this complete picture from like the tiniest detail of how a plant survives all the way up to
the geopolitical scale of nuclear testing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just a physical journey. This is a dive into survival itself.
So to get you oriented, picture the middle of Australia, but a bit south of the Tropic of Capricorn.
Okay.
We're talking coordinates around 29 degrees south, 129 degrees east. And our mission here really is to get past that stereotype of a barren wasteland.
For sure.
We need to walk away understanding its immense scale, the incredibly specialized life that has mastered this place, and the strange paradox of its history.
How it's both a sanctuary and
a site of permanent human contamination. Exactly.
So let's unpack this vast hidden world. Okay, so the first thing you have to grapple with when you talk about the GVD is just the scale.
It's staggering.
Forget the Sahara for a second. In an Australian context, this is the biggest. This is number one.
And it's so big that even the official measurements, they vary.
I saw that. Why is that?
Well, it depends on how you define the edges of an ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Is it this type of soil, that type of plant? So our sources give a range from about 348,000 square kilometers.
Which is already huge.
All the way up to maybe 422,000 square kilometers.
Wow. So to put that in perspective for someone listening, say, in Europe.
You're talking about the entire size of Germany.
The whole country.
Or, for American listeners, it's a bit bigger than the state of Montana. It's a landmass that just swallows countries whole.
And that difference in the numbers, that just speaks to how remote it is.
Right.
It's hard to even survey it properly.
For sure. But the number that really got me was the width. It's over 700 kilometers wide from west to east.
That's just an ocean of arid land.
And that width has huge implications for the climate, for the ecology. You're crossing multiple, microclimates and pressure systems.
So to really understand it, you need to place it on the map next to its neighbors.
Exactly. Its position is key. To the south, you've got the Nullarbor Plain,
which everyone knows is that super flat, treeless expanse.
A huge limestone slab, basically. It's
Yeah.
a very clear geological boundary. Then, if you go north of the GVD, you hit the Gibson Desert. To the west, you've got the Western Australian mulga shrublands, which are a little less dry. And then to the east...
That's where it gets interesting, with the stony deserts.
Right, you butt up against the Terrari Sturt Stony Desert. And it's important to list these because the GVD is a transitional zone. It's not one single thing.
So it's mostly sand ridges, but as you move east, it changes.
Precisely. As you approach the Sturt Stony Desert, you start getting into what are called gibber plains. The boundaries aren't fences. They're these slow ecological gradients.
Let's dig into that landscape then, because the mental image of just endless sand dunes, that's wrong here.
Totally wrong. It's a mosaic. Yes, there are sandhills, but they're not the massive shifting dunes you might imagine. They're smaller, more stable.
And in between them?
You have grassland plains and, fascinatingly, these huge salt lakes.
Which aren't really lakes most of the time, I assume.
No, they're ephemeral. They only hold water for a short time after a really big rainstorm. Most of the time, they're just these vast, white, salt-crusted pans.
And then there's the feature I think is so cool, the desert pavement.
The gibber plains.
Yeah, the gibber plains.
You have to understand the gibber to understand the GVD. The landscape is covered in this tightly packed surface of small, dark, weathered pebbles. The gibbers.
How does that even form?
It's a process called deflation. Over thousands of years, the wind just blows all the fine sand and dust away.
So it leaves the heavy stuff behind.
It leaves the heavier, gravelly stuff, and it forms this interlocking armor on the surface of the desert. It's incredibly stable, but it's brutal for anything trying to grow or dig.
That armor sounds like it would affect the climate, too.
Yeah.
What are the conditions that create this kind of world?
Well, the number one thing is the low and gem and totally unpredictable rainfall.
Right.
The average is only 200 to 250 millimeters a year, about 8 to 10 inches.
But the key word there is average.
Exactly. The irregularity is what kills you.
Yeah.
Life out there isn't about surviving the average. It's about surviving the longest possible time without any rain. And droughts can go for years.
And yet, in the middle of all that dryness, you have these bursts of just intense weather.
This is the really interesting part. The GVD gets, on average, 15 to 20 thunderstorms a year.
That seems like a lot for a desert.
It is, and it feels like this violent compensation for the dry spells. These storms are the lifeblood of the whole ecosystem.
So they're not gentle showers.
Oh, no. They're often very localized, incredibly intense, and they can dump a huge chunk of the entire year's rainfall in just a few hours.
And that's what fills the salt lakes.
It fills the lakes, the clay pans. It triggers this frantic, super fast life cycle for certain plants, insects, and as we'll get into, some amazing frogs.
But on a day-to-day basis, it's the temperature that's the real challenge.
For sure, the extremes are just punishing. Summer daytime temps are like a furnace. You're easily looking at 32 to 40 degrees Celsius.
It's 90 to 104 Fahrenheit.
Right. And that heat is what drives so many animals to live underground.
But then the winter brings this surprising relief.
That's the crucial contrast. Winter days are beautiful. They drop to, 18 to 23 Celsius, which is in the 60s and low 70s Fahrenheit.
That's actually quite pleasant.
It's a critical period of relief. It lets animals forage without as much stress, and it's when plants can recover if there's any moisture left in the soil. It's a cycle of extreme stress and relative calm.
So it's a desert of extremes, of irregularity, and it's armored.
Yeah.
It demands, incredible determination from anything that tries to live there. And that vast, punishing place was, for early European explorers, this just almost impossible barrier.
Mm-hmm.
The history really begins with the attempts to cross it, starting with the guy who actually gave the desert its name.
That would be Ernest Giles, a British-born Australian explorer. In 1875, he finally did it. He crossed the desert.
And he named it in classic 19th century fashion.
After the reigning monarch, he called it the Great Victoria Desert.
There's a real irony in that, isn't there? This incredibly remote, uniquely Australian place.
It's named for a queen and a palace on the other side of the world. It just perfectly captures the colonial mindset of the era. A place wasn't really real until it had a European name on it.
And his journey wasn't a walk in the park.
Not at all. He was out there with no real maps, no modern gear, relying on bush skills, and very often on the knowledge of the local indigenous people he met. He really laid the groundwork.
And after him, there was this continuous push to map it and, more importantly, to find a use for it.
Right. In 1891, you had David Lindsay's expedition, which went north to south. And then as the country developed, the motivation changed. It wasn't just about exploring anymore.
It was about money.
It was about resources. That brings us to Frank Hahn.
He was the prospector.
Exactly. He spent 5 years, from 1903 to 1908, just combing the desert, looking for gold.
Did he find any?
Not in any real commercial quantity, but these guys, Hahn and Giles and Lindsay, they established the first rough routes. They found the water sources.
And then we jump forward a few decades into the mid-20th century, and we get the person who probably had the biggest impact on how people get around there today.
Len Beadle.
Len Beadle.
His work in the 1960s wasn't about gold. It was driven by the Cold War.
Right. Access.
He was a surveyor, and he's famous for building the first tracks right through the heart of the desert, roads like the Ann Beadle Highway.
And we should be clear, when we say highway, we're not talking about pavement and service station.
Oh, no. These are rough, unsealed tracks. They're incredible feats of engineering and sheer bloody-mindedness, but they're not highways.
And they were built for a very specific and much darker purpose.
They were built to service the other human activity that came to define the GVD after World War II.
Nuclear weapons testing.
Yes. It's a jarring transition, isn't it?
It really is. You go from naming the land for a queen to using it as a bombing range.
The very isolation that had protected its ecology for millennia suddenly made it the perfect target.
Let's spend some time on this because it's a critical part of the story. The British nuclear tests.
The British weapons trials of the 1950s and early 1960s, they were conducted right on the eastern edge of the GVD.
Where exactly?
The two main sites were named Maralinga and Emu Field. They conducted a series of atmospheric tests, the big mushroom clouds, and then a lot of smaller ground-level trials.
And these left behind a A terrible legacy.
A permanent one. The areas were contaminated with radioactive materials.
The sources are really specific about one isotope in particular, plutonium-239. Why is that one so bad?
It comes down to its half-life.
Which is?
Plutonium-239 has a half-life of about 24,100 years.
24,000 years.
So any contamination isn't a temporary problem you can just clean up. It's a management problem that will outlast civilizations.
So what does this all mean, connecting it to the present? The GVD is defined by this paradox.
It's the ultimate paradox. The same isolation that lets you have these massive, pristine conservation zones,
Which we'll get to.
is the exact same quality that appealed to weapons designers who needed a place where, a bit of radioactive fallout wouldn't immediately affect a major city.
There were cleanup attempts, right?
Yeah, there were, but they were, let's say, inadequate at first. A royal commission in the 1980s was scathing about the whole thing.
So this is still an active problem.
A very active problem. Managing the long-term threat of plutonium contamination in a place that is also a World Biosphere Reserve, that's probably the biggest human challenge the desert faces.
Okay, so let's move from that human history to the biological resilience.
Yeah.
Section 3 is about this incredible unseen ecosystem, the life that has figured out how to get by on next to no water.
It's a masterclass in efficiency. The GVD is not barren at all. It's just very, very selective.
And it all starts with the plants.
It has to. The vegetation is the foundation. We're talking about a kind of wooded steppe, especially in the low areas, the swales between the sand ridges.
So what are the dominant trees? I see a couple of types of eucalyptus mentioned.
Yeah, you see a lot of mallees and related eucalypts, specifically Eucalyptus gongulacarpa, the desert gum, and Eucalyptus youngiana.
And how do they do it? How do they survive years of drought?
Two main tricks. First, they have these incredibly deep and widespread root systems. They're tapping into water far, far below the surface.
And the second trick has to do with fire.
Absolutely. The mallee eucalypts are famous for their lignotubers.
What's that?
It's this big woody swelling at the base of the trunk, mostly underground. It's packed with nutrients and dormant buds. So when a fire comes through and burns the whole tree to the ground,
It can just resprout from the base?
instantly. It's built for drought and for fire, a perfect desert adaptation.
But the real star of the show, the thing that covers the ground everywhere, is the spinifex.
You cannot talk about the Australian arid zone without talking about spinifex. Specifically, a species called Triodia bastoii.
And it's not like a normal long grass.
Not at all. It grows in these big, dense, spiky hummocks. It's the engineering marvel of the desert floor.
How so? What does it do?
Well, it stabilizes the sand, for one, but more importantly, it creates microclimates. The base of a spinifex clump is way cooler and holds more moisture than the sand around it.
So it's like a little apartment building for desert creatures.
It's exactly that. It's the refuge for insects, for lizards, for tiny marsupials. It's the cornerstone of the whole habitat.
Which brings us to the fauna. And the big survival strategy here is just avoidance.
Exactly. If you can't handle 40-degree heat, you just get out of it. You become a burrower, a subterranean specialist. This is the hidden zoo of the GVD.
Okay, so give us the stars of this underground world.
Well, number one has to be the southern marsupial mole, Notorictes typhlops.
This thing is incredible.
It's almost completely blind. Its eyes are just little vestiges under the skin. It doesn't dig permanent burrows. It literally swims through the loose sand.
It swims through the earth.
Yes, its front claws are like massive shovels, and it just pushes through the sand looking for insects, collapsing the tunnel behind it as it goes.
Wow.
It's an unbelievable level of specialization.
And then there's the water-holding frog. The name kind of gives it away.
It's maybe the ultimate example of adapting to irregular rain. When there's a huge downpour, the frog comes to the surface, eats like crazy, and absorbs a massive amount of water.
It just bloats itself up.
It does. And then, as the ground dries out, it digs itself deep, maybe a meter down.
Yeah, this is where it gets weird.
It secretes this waterproof mucus cocoon all around its body.
Ugh.
It seals itself inside this bag made of its own slime, and it just shuts down. Its metabolism slows to almost nothing, and it can stay down there for years.
For years.
Possibly even longer, just waiting for the seismic shock of the next heavy rain to wake it up.
That is just an amazing survival hack.
It's an evolutionary insurance policy against drought.
Okay, so let's talk about the reptiles, because this is where it gets really interesting, including some very recent discoveries.
Reptiles are kings out here. They can manage the heat by moving in and out of the sun, but the big aha moment from the sources is about the Central Range's taipan.
A taipan. one of the world's most venomous snakes.
Exactly. And it was only formally identified as a distinct species in 2007.
2007, that's less than 20 years ago.
It tells you everything you need to know about how vast and unstudied this region still is. We're still finding new species of large, highly venomous snakes out there.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And what about the predators at the top of the food chain?
Well, the dingo is a key predator, and its presence here is really significant because the GVD is north of the famous dingo fence.
So what does that mean, being north of the fence?
It means the dingo population is largely unregulated by humans.
Yeah.
South of the fence, they're mostly eradicated to protect sheep. Here, they play their natural role in the ecosystem.
Which is actually a good thing for conservation.
It's a critical thing. Dingoes help control the populations of feral cats and foxes.
Which are devastating for native wildlife.
Exactly. So ironically, the dingo acts as a guardian for the smaller native marsupials and birds.
And then you've got the giant lizards.
The big monitors. You have the parntee, which can grow over 2 meters long, one of the biggest lizards in the world. Wow.
And the sandgoanna. They're the patrols of the sand ridges, eating pretty much anything they can find.
So it's clear life isn't just surviving here. It's engineered these incredible solutions.
Highly sophisticated solutions to the most extreme problems you can imagine.
Which leads us straight into how humans fit into this picture today. We've done the geography, the climate, the amazing biology. Now let's focus on the people.
Right. Because the human history here goes back tens of thousands of years before Ernest Giles showed up.
And today, the human population is predominantly Indigenous Australians.
Yes, the people who've always been there. The sources mention several specific groups, the Kogarah, the Mirning, and the Pitjantjatjara people.
And there's a really interesting point in the source material that, unlike some other remote areas, the Aboriginal populations here have been increasing.
Which points to ongoing cultural strength and resilience, especially in places where communities have been able to maintain their connection to the land and traditional practices.
And there are active efforts to support that, like the Wilirara creative programs. Those programs are vital. They're about young Indigenous adults actively maintaining and evolving their culture. It's not about freezing it in time.
So it's not just about preserving old songs.
No, it's about traditional art, but also modern art. It's about land management techniques like controlled burning and making sure that deep knowledge of the environment is passed on to the next generation.
Which is essential both for culture and for modern ecological management.
Absolutely.
But even with these thriving communities, the place is still incredibly isolated. Getting around is a major challenge.
The isolation is profound. Access is still mostly limited to those rough tracks that Len Beadle built back in the 60s.
The Connie Sue Highway, the Ann Beadle Highway.
Right. You need a serious 4x4 vehicle, and you need to be completely self-sufficient. And that very difficulty of access, it acts as a natural filter. It limits the pressure from the outside world.
And that leads us perfectly into the conservation story of the GVD.
Yeah.
It seems like all the things that make it so hard to live in have also helped to protect it.
That's the great irony. The harshness has been its salvation. Because it's never been suitable for large-scale agriculture or ranching, many of the habitats are basically pristine.
And the numbers on this are amazing. The key statistic is that 31% of the desert is officially protected.
31%. And when you remember we're talking about an area the size of Germany, that is a monumental conservation achievement.
A huge area of land.
It's a vast network of protected areas, including some that are recognized globally. The prime example is the Mamungari Conservation Park in South Australia.
Which used to be called the Unnamed Conservation Park.
Which just tells you how remote it is.
Yeah.
And Mamungari is not just a park, it's one of Australia's 14 World Biosphere Reserves, which is a designation from UNESCO. It recognizes its global importance.
And the management of these areas is really modern, with a big emphasis on Indigenous co-management.
The governance is key. A huge part of this protected network is made up of what are called Indigenous Protected Areas, or IPAs.
What's an IPA?
It's where the Aboriginal traditional owners voluntarily agree with the government to manage their land for biodiversity conservation. It's a fusion of ancient, traditional knowledge and modern conservation science.
So the people with the deepest connection to the land are the ones leading its protection.
In many cases, yes, especially in South Australia, where the Anangu Pitjantjatjara, or APY lands, make up a massive local government area that's under Indigenous ownership and management.
And this is a whole network of parks and reserves, not just one big one.
It's a mosaic. You have the IPAs, you have state-run nature reserves like the Great Victoria Desert Nature Reserve in WA, and then national parks like Lake Gardner. It's this multi-layered system designed to protect all the different habitat types across the desert.
It's just a stunning success story, especially when you remember that geographically it's right next door to the areas contaminated by those nuclear tests.
That is the defining contrast of the GVD. It's one of the most ecologically intact arid zones left on Earth, largely thanks to its isolation and the dedication of its traditional owners and conservationists.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. Let's consolidate our deep dive into the Great Victoria Desert for you. We've really hit on three big contrasting themes. First, just the immense scale. It's Australia's largest desert, and it's not just sand. It's this mix of sandhills and those tough pebble-armored gibber plains.
All of it shaped by that rhythm of long droughts broken by these intense, dramatic thunderstorms.
Second, its history is this total paradox.
Yeah.
You have the classic European exploration story with Ernest Giles.
And then this dark 20th century shadow of nuclear testing at Maralinga.
Right, which left behind this permanent legacy of contamination, especially that plutonium-239, which needs to be managed for, what, tens of thousands of years?
A geological timescale, basically.
And third, the ecology. It's a masterclass in adaptation. We talked about being a subterranean survivor.
The sand-swimming mall, the frog in its mucus cocoon.
All the way up to the dingo, acting as this vital conservationist north of the dingo fence. And all of that has led to this huge conservation success, 31% of the desert protected.
Much of it through indigenous-led initiatives like the IPAs and the Mamungari World Biosphere Reserve.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture...
What's so amazing is the resilience. The desert has absorbed some of the most powerful technology humans have ever created, atomic bombs, and yet its unique ecology and its ancient cultures, they persist, they thrive.
So that leaves a really important question for you to think about. The nuclear contamination zones and the World Biosphere Reserve are geographically very close neighbors.
Right next to each other in some cases.
So given the 24,000-year half-life of plutonium, how do you practically balance the need to manage those contaminated sites for millennia with the goal of keeping the areas right next door truly pristine?
And how do those historic threats actually inform modern conservation? Does having a permanent, off-limits, hazardous zone nearby ironically help protect the surrounding land by keeping people out?
It's something to think about. We'd encourage you to look at a map, see how these zones of destruction and preservation actually overlap in this vast, hidden, and truly incredible world.